Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and I'm not alone. I'm joined by the wonderful, the venerable Mr. Felix and Mr. Xeon.
Both at the same time?
We've never done this before.
Breaking new ground in the video space. YouTube won't know what's hit it.
We don't.
It's completely new to us. Anyway, recently I've been noticing, certainly on the site and on YouTube in the comments and stuff like that, that there's a rhetoric going around with quite a few people. It is a minority, but it's a vocal minority, saying that Nintendo should just get on and make a brand new Switch, some new hardware. And the reasoning behind it being that many of the ports being released from other systems are not up to snuff and don't run as well as they could do in their eyes, and that the easy solution is just Nintendo make a bigger computer. And I'm here to tell you, and the others are here to hopefully back me up at the very least, that's absolute bupkis. We've got some examples of some rough ports, should we say, and some really bad ports, and some somewhat comparable or contrasting good ports to sort of say, hey, look what can be done. Whether it's, time constraints on the developers, or whether they don't have the expertise in-house, or maybe they just have different priorities, we don't know. We can only speculate. But we do know that there are some damn fine ports out there. And I'm going to start with a biggie. It is it's not a biggie, it's just a recent one. Alan Wake Remastered. You guys have both seen this, haven't you?
Yeah, it's... when I
It's
saw
a bummer,
how it
isn't
looked...
it?
Yeah, when I saw how it looked on the 360 and then comparing that to Switch, that is seriously disappointing.
It is, yeah. If it was at least comparable to the 360 version, I'd be like, well, the Switch is more powerful, but whatever, okay. But it shouldn't be notably worse than the original 360 version. How does that happen? I know how it happens. It's a port of the remaster rather than a port of the original, with remastering done to it afterwards. But even so, that ain't the way. That's not a good way to do ports. The visuals are blurry. The frame rate tanks in a lot of places. It's just not a good port. Alan Wake himself looks like he's running on much, much older hardware.
And the 360, that era of systems could still really put out some incredibly fantastic-looking games. I was just playing a Nintendo Wii game yesterday for a video that I'm working on, and I was really surprised by how smooth the frame rate was and how sharp everything is. And you're right, it is such a bummer that the devs ended up having to use the remastered version from what we've gathered, right, for this port instead. Because back in the day when I played Alan Wake on 360, I remember it being a real looker, and the graphics and just the environments were such a it really immersed you into the game, and this Switch port is not the case at all. The cutscenes are pretty good, right? You were saying, and I think you showed off a bit of those in the video too. But
I think they're pre-rendered because they run too well, Also, I can see compression artifacts, so that's a bit of a closed case.
Yeah, that is something to look out for, and you're like, oh, now I'm smart.
But the thing is, we have games that run really well from that era on the Switch, right, Alex?
We do, yes, and the example I'd like to use is, it's a classic. Persona 5, well, I suppose Royal is not a PS3 game, but it's still based on the original PS3 game, Persona 5. And on Switch, it runs blinking well, It's a little bit blurry in some places, or I'd say maybe fuzzy is a better word, and it only runs at 30 frames a second, but it's a perfectly playable way to play the game. And I think it's great. I've been playing it recently, and I've been having a grand old time. You wouldn't think that it wasn't inherently a Switch game. It's just yep, okay, you just take it for granted. It's great.
Yeah, I've seen games on Switch that look much worse that are actually only made for Switch, so big props.
And not even half as stylish, I'm sure. Have you seen that UI?
Yeah,
it's really ridiculous.
Do you remember Sakurai talking about it in one of his recent YouTube videos?
Yeah.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. He mentioned how it's the more style you use in a UI, the less clear it becomes. But with Persona 5, he was like, but it is extremely stylish.
I think it's really nice though that, you know, obviously like you mentioned, the frame rate it's 30 FPS versus 60 here, but at least like in Persona's situation here as well, it's stable, and it doesn't at any point, like when I was playing Persona 5 Royal on Switch as well, there was no point really where I was like, man, I wish I was playing this on a different system. It felt like it was made for the Switch at that point. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way too? Yeah.
Yeah, as I say, I just, you know, I've played it on PS4 as well. Not Royal, admittedly, the original version of Persona 5. Persona 5 on the PS4. That's confusing. It's not confusing. So yeah, I played the original version, and now I've played the Switch version, and I have no desire to go back to the PS4 version. It's just like, yep, the Switch is, you know, more convenient for me, and you know, it's not a lesser version. It's the same game.
I wonder if that's why. Like, that wouldn't be why it took them forever to release the game. But could you imagine if the team was just like, no, guys, it's not ready yet. We really need to take like 4 years to make this happen. And if they did, props to them. That probably is not the case. Really, nobody believed that. But it is really such a good port that I wouldn't if we found that out 10 years down the road, I wouldn't be mad. I wouldn't be surprised. I'd just be happy. They did great.
Bit surprised.
Yeah, you're right. I'd be surprised. Who am I kidding?
But Felix, are there other bad ports on the Switch? Say it isn't so.
There is, but I want to take it a little bit different angle here, because we talk a lot about the graphics and the ports look so bad, but I want to talk about two games and compare them, because it is two games that run fine on Switch, but one you can just see that they didn't like put in the time to make a good control scheme, and the other is absolutely fantastic. It's Lego Bricktales and it's Return to Monkey Island. Lego Bricktales runs alright. I mean, if you see it on other platforms, it runs much better. There are some frame drops, but it's definitely playable. But when it comes to the actual building process, it's horrible. It's like having a claw machine, because this was made for mouse, you know? And controlling it with a controller, it's just very clunky. You control around the arrow, and the perspective is really weird, and, you know, turning the camera, it's yuck, okay? But if we look at Return to Monkey Island, they have totally nailed it. They've revamped how you do a point-and-click adventure, so instead of going around and clicking, you control your character with the analog stick, and then you use the buttons on the back to shift between the different areas that you can interact with.
Both of these games traditionally would have been designed, like, firstly for PC, right? Like,
exactly.
Like you were saying, Lego.
Yeah.
Okay, so they both had, like, a similar control scheme kind of in mind, right?
Yeah,
like,
they were both originally, I mean, point-and-click adventures obviously run better on a PC, because then you can actually, you know,
Point and click?
Exactly.
Sure.
So, you're absolutely right, Sion. But if you don't like the control scheme with the controller in Return to Monkey Island, if you take it out of the dock, you can actually play it with touch controls, which is just really neat that you actually have two different ways, both work brilliantly to play this game. And I just think this shows that with graphics, with controls, it's just about how much the developers, how much time they have, how much care is put into it, because maybe they just think it's on the Switch, expectations are low, and thus we can save budget.
Well, and you're right. Like, we'll never know, like, exactly, unless if we go to the devs and ask them all the questions and they give us the answers, which that doesn't always work that way, you know. So we'll never know exactly, like, why didn't Bricktales get a better control system on Switch. But it is so nice, like, when you are playing a game like a Monkey Island, and they really have, like, taken the time and added in those controls, because I love point-and-click adventure games. Like, I played Thimbleweed Park. It was, like, one of the first, like, to come to Switch, like, way back when the Switch first launched, and I think that had touch controls, but there are a few other ones that I've played over the years. Like, I should look this up instead of just spouting my mouth, but there have been a few that I've played that haven't had that, and it feels so natural, like such a simple inclusion almost, but but I guess it comes down to time. And but when, like you said, when you really have those extra control methods, it opens up the floodgates for accessibility for people, and it just can really change the game like entirely. Do you know what you mostly played Monkey Island with? Was it like...
I played it with controller because I actually didn't know that there was touch controls in the start. I would also like to add that I don't think the devs invented this. I think it's been on other point and click, but they could easily they could easily have just taken the route as Brick Tales, where you move this almost cursor around and then you have to like click. Because I've had another, what was it called, like a game about a murder, and then it like resets every time, and that was a point and click.
Oh.
But then that was exactly that, you move around a cursor, and it's not fun. And I was really worried with that with Return to Monkey Island, but I was happily surprised.
I'm glad to know that you appreciated the touch controls so much too, because I think that's something I always freak out about when I find out a Switch game has touch controls, and it seems like nobody cares. So thank you for standing on that pedestal.
Of course, you almost sometimes forget that the Switch even has touch controls, because so many games just don't utilize it. That it's like, I was playing The Witcher and that had touch controls, and I was like, what?
The Witcher has touch controls?
Like in the menus and stuff.
I wasn't expecting you could move, Geralt around by tapping his
I'm
little
actually not
leggies.
sure now. Now I'm really unsure.
Oh my god, yeah, it does.
Hey! It was not just something I dreamt.
That's absolutely
awesome.
That's absolutely crackers. I can't believe I didn't know that.
Well,
do you know something I do know, though?
What?
The next game we're going to be talking about.
No way.
The Witcher 3, isn't it?
No, it's not. But that will probably come up. Let's be brutally honest. It's a video about ports. Xeon, you've got a bad port in mind. It's been burrowing a hole in the back of your brain. What is it?
Well, it's this one's more like I have a fantastic port that I want to talk about, and I have something to compare it to, I suppose. Is Nier Automata or Automata. I used to say Automata, and now I'm trying to say Automata. I'm trying to be a good boy, because that's what the devs want me to say.
I think it's pronounced Automata.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Insert an explosion effect here if you can.
He's not going to do it.
No, I'm just going to leave that as it is.
Boom! So Nier runs at 30 on Switch and 60 on PS4, and there is some pop-in with environment, like with textures and things like that, but you don't really... Like, Nier is such a fast-paced game that the combat is what matters. Like, running around and having everything be smooth, that's what matters most. And the devs focused on that this time, and I think they nailed it right out of the park. Like, there was no point as well with Nier where because I've played it through, I put in like 30 hours on PS4, and I love that game to death. And never when I was playing it did I feel like I wished I was playing it on other consoles either, in docked or in handheld mode. And it actually, Tom Whitehead reviewed the game for us. He mentioned in his review that the game actually like shines really nice when you're playing in handheld mode. And part of me was like, no way, like, come on. But he's right, like, the details pop just a bit better and everything looks a bit more smooth. But if you compare that to something like the Ninja Gaiden collection, or the Ninja Gaiden Sigma collection, which has Ninja Gaiden 1, 2, and 3, all the Sigma versions, all those games tried to shoot for 60 FPS at 720p, but they rarely hit that target. And I think because... this is just speculation again. Maybe if they would have shot for a lower goal, the game would just be a bit more enjoyable. But it's so all over the place that it kind of ends up being a mess. And those are really important games to a lot of people. I remember when Ninja Gaiden 1 came out, it was kind of like the Dark Souls of Xbox at the time. Like everybody was like, man, you got to get an Xbox so you can try and beat Ninja Gaiden. And to know that it just came out in this, I don't want to say half-baked, this half-baked port. It's just really nice when it just works out. And buy Nier on Switch. Just please do that. I'll shut up and just say that.
Okay, Xeon, I'll do that.
Okay, Xeon, I'll do that.
Thanks, guys. Wow. That was so easy. I hope that in the comments, okay, Xeon, I will do that. Just over and over again.
But there are some times when absolutely nothing goes right, and the wrong things are prioritized, and, well, I say the wrong things are prioritized. It seems nothing is prioritized except just getting the game released. We've got a classic example of Ark Survival Evolved, which is infamous for being such a terrible, terrible port. Like, the game doesn't run well on any system historically. You know, it's always been a bit of a resource hog, but the Switch version really, really is something else. And, you know, when it comes to comparison, you can take any port. You can take a basic port and sort of point to it and go, look, it runs better than that. But it's kind of an open world game, and the one that I would like to compare it to is another classic, The Witcher 3. Yes, the one with touch controls.
Who knew?
It's absolutely, like, don't get me wrong, there is, you know, sort of reasonable call to play The Witcher 3 on other systems. But it was, at the time, a current generation game released on Nintendo's significantly weaker hardware, and they got it running, in a way that I don't bother playing the PS4 version, because even though I'm quite sensitive to frame rates and stuff like that, it just doesn't bother me. They've done such a fabulous job importing it, and it really is, you know, this alongside things like Doom and Doom Eternal really are like the poster children of good Switch ports. And, you know, sort of, they have great big ruddy teams behind them, so maybe it's not fair to compare the two. Okay, I hear you. Let's use a smaller team, because Ark, I mean, you know, when it comes to comparing games to Ark, we can just use the new version of Ark that they're about to release, which runs a lot better. But let's not for the time being. Let's compare it to another small game, or at least a small team, No Man's Sky, recently released on Switch, and it runs really quite fantastically. Yeah, it doesn't run as well as it does on other systems. You know, it's largely low resolution, 30 frames a second. Sometimes it stutters if you're doing, like, really busy stuff, but, you know, I spoke to the guys there, and I seem to remember it was 4 people worked on this port.
That's absolutely
4
insane.
On a game that was historically notorious for running poorly, and they managed to get it running this well on Switch. I think that's an absolute triumph.
And with No Man's Sky too, like, I watched your coverage on that. There's definitely compromises that they make in the fact that, like, a lot of
of course,
elements in the game, like, pop in and stuff, but it still was an enjoyable experience, right? Like, I even played it, so I can't say that, but from your time with it, you seem to have enjoyed it
completely. I'm still playing it, and I have no desire to go over to any other platform, even though it's on Game Pass. But I've got it on the Switch, and it's just sort of like, yeah, you know, I'll just play it on Switch. I mean, part of that, I think, is the fact that the Switch is a lot cheaper to run than an Xbox. And given the current energy crisis, that's not a bad thing. But even then, I just find it more convenient. Just, you know, Switch is, you know, always there. Just turn it on. Bosh, it's there. Okay, back into No Man's Sky. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, you can't take your Xbox outside and play underneath the stars, right? Like, just in an open field.
Yeah, the portability is a big, like...
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why I also played The Witcher. I think I have 80 hours on the Switch before I actually went and played it on the Xbox. And even though it doesn't look very good, it's such a huge game. And you also have both DLCs. You can play it on the Switch. That is... I mean, I can't even begin to describe how insane that is.
Good?
Insanely good, yeah.
Just good. Yeah, it's just good. But there, you know, I think we've made our point. You know, there are so many fantastic ports out there, and yes, I don't deny that if Nintendo released a more powerful Switch or just a more powerful console, the porting will probably be more straightforward. But I guarantee we will still get on Nintendo's next hardware, whatever it is, we will still get rough ports. For whatever reason, we will still get them. I mean, there's a game recently came out, Gotham Knights, and it's a Series X and PS5 game. It's 30 frames a second.
Yeah,
is it?
Yeah. And it's not a bad-looking game by any stretch, but it's 30 frames a second, and I know we've been talking and, saying, oh, this game runs brilliantly on the Switch, it's 30 frames a second. But the Switch is this teeny, tiny little thing in comparison.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have a game that big with a budget that's, let's be honest, is essentially infinite behind it.
And you have hundreds of people working on it.
Yeah. You shouldn't settle for 30 on the Series X or the PS5. Not for a new game.
Did they pump too many pretty special effects into that game?
There was too many Batman.
Too many at once. And maybe that is the situation where they tried 60 and it wasn't stable and they were just like, 30. And I do commend them for that. But I have not looked into Gotham Knights at all, so I should zip my mouth.
But what do you think? Do you think that Nintendo do need to pull their finger out and get some new hardware out there? Or are you happy with the Switch where it is at the moment? Let us know with a comment down below, and thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you paw that subscribe button. It's okay if it's 30, and be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.
Imagine being able to see the 2 wallpapers in 4K.
As long as the subscribe button is just stable, I don't care if it's 30. We don't care if you're 60. Just be you. Just be stable, please.
I'm 30 years old.